Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be talking about these 6 books that I read in April. I had a pretty decent reading month, I'm not gonna lie. I felt like I was kind of flying through books towards the end. I love that for me, and we have a pretty good variety of genres as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and jump into it, but first things first, I will go ahead and pop up some reading stats here for you guys. My mood, how many pages I read this month, my overall star rating, which I think was like a 3.6. So me saying it was a great reading month, it could be better. It could be better. In case you were curious as to where I get this information from, I get it all from Storygraph, which is an app that I adore for information like that. So let's go ahead and jump into the books that I read this month. So up first, I read the 3rd and final book in the Caraval trilogy, which is called Finale. This is by Stephanie Garber. I really wanted to get the Caraval trilogy sort of out of the way before I started reading the Once Upon a Broken Heart series, because they say that you're supposed to read the Caraval trilogy first. I don't think you necessarily have to, but me being the completionist that I am, I was like, I want to. And then when I read the first Caraval book, I realized I loved it, so I had to read the trilogy. So Finale is the 3rd and final book, and I ended up giving this one 3 stars. And I'm sad about it because in this book, you're not really participating in Caraval. Caraval was this big magical game that people could go and play where so many things could happen, and you get a grand prize, and one person wins the grand prize, and it's a wish, and it's just all so magical and wonderful. The first 2 books, you're playing the Caraval game just from 2 different perspectives, and in this book, you're not, but you're still following along with the storyline. This one is also dual POV for the first time, which I enjoyed, because the first book you're following Scarlet, and then in the second book you're following another character, and then in this book you're following the 2 characters. So I really liked that because I felt like both stories were so different. Like, we were following 2 different storylines. And the one thing I will say I did enjoy about this is that when one storyline seemed a little bit like it was heading towards a more boring area, you quickly switched back over to the other storyline, and I liked that because I never felt like I was bored. But I just miss Caraval so much. And there's this main male character in the second book named Dante. I mean, he's in the first book too, but he's in the second book a lot more, and he was so hot in the second book. And in this book, I just didn't feel that same passion for him that I felt in the second, which was a little bit sad, and I think that's another reason why I ultimately gave it 3 stars. Of course, if you are going to read the Caraval trilogy, which I do still recommend, you gotta read this one just to finalize it, just to hit that finale. But yeah, this one was just a 3 stars for me. It wasn't my favorite, but I am glad that I finally finished this trilogy, and now I can move on to the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy, which follows Jack of Hearts. I'm excited for that. Moving along and continuing on series, I've been really wanting to kind of keep it pushing through series that I've started. I read Finlay Donovan Jumps the Gun. This is by El Casamano. This is the 3rd book again in the Finlay Donovan series. There's only 4 books out so far, and I am waiting for the 4th one to come out in paperback so I can pick it up. But I did finally get to the 3rd book, and I fully agree with every single person that reviewed this book. This was a solid 3. It just didn't have the excitement that the first 2 Finlay Donovan books have. So Finlay Donovan is this like writer, and she's a single mom, and she goes to meet her agent in the first book, and her agent are talking about a storyline for a book, and a woman overhears and thinks that the storyline is real and that Finlay is a hitman. So she hires her to kill her husband, and that's kind of how the first book starts. And then so many wild and crazy antics kind of follow, and that's now where we're at here in the 3rd book. And this is such a fun, cozy mystery series, but this book in particular was just not it. And I know that the 4th book, or at least I've heard that the 4th book gets a lot better, but I think it's mainly the reason that in this book, we're stuck at the same setting the entire time, and the plot just doesn't feel like it's moving. It feels like it's going so slow. Like, the main plot of this book, the main point is for Finlay to like find out who another hitman is, and I felt like the way it happened, it could have been done in like 2-3 chapters, and this book just dragged it on out, and like I said, I know this is probably just like a midway turning point, but I am really looking forward to the next book because this sets up so nicely for the next book. I think the next one's called Finlay Donovan Rolls the Dice. They're heading to Atlantic City. I'm excited for that one because the storylines we're following going to that are going to be so exciting as far as I'm concerned. So this was fine. I gave it a 3. I still like Finlay. I still like Vero. I think they're all fun. I like that she's in this like love triangle with like a hot young lawyer and like a hot older cop. I don't know why, it just speaks to me. I love it so much, but Finlay Donovan jumps the gun. Next, continuing on, me reading my Riley Sager backlist. I only have one more after this and I'm so excited. I read Survive the Night by Riley Sager. This is the next to last that I have. The last one I have is The Only One Left, which came out last year, and I'm reading it this month because Middle of the Night comes out next month and I am so excited. Riley Sager is one of my favorite authors, so I definitely wanted to read his backlist, and Survive the Night was on there, so I read it. And I gave this a 3.25. This one was not my favorite. It really wasn't. We are following this girl. What is her name? We're following this girl named Charlie who wants to go home from college because her roommate was just murdered by a serial killer and she just needs to get out of there. She has this thing where she sees movies in her mind and she kind of like uses that to deflect the trauma that she's gone through as a child. So she relates to movies and she's obsessed with movies, so she sees these hallucinations essentially in her mind all the time. So she saw the killer, but like she can't quite picture who it is because she was seeing a movie in her mind during it. So she just wants to go home, and she decides to go to this like college board where like you can put up, I don't know, like if you're looking for a job or if you're missing like a cat or something, and put up like, hey, I'm looking for a ride. And she meets this guy named Josh who's going the same way, and he's like, I'll take you, and he seems fine enough. So she's like, okay, I'll go with Josh. He's going the same way I'm going, which coincidentally is to Ohio. And yeah, so she gets in a car with this guy she doesn't know after her best friend was murdered by a serial killer, and she starts to fully believe that he's the serial killer, and so antics ensue. And this, in very typical Riley Sager fashion, you are following so many twists and turns. There's a lot of things that are popping up that you don't expect. The main twist I did call, which I was a little upset about, but all the other twists and turns were very fun and exciting as well, so I did enjoy those. This wasn't my favorite Riley Sager. My personal, I should do a whole video on like my favorite Riley Sagers, or at least breaking down all of the Riley Sager books. Maybe I will. Personal favorite is Home Before Dark. This, I would say, is my second to last favorite, second to least favorite. Because it was okay. It just like the pace was so slow. It was just so slow. You're in the car and I'm like, And then she's seeing all these like movies in her mind and these hallucinations. So it's a very unreliable narrator, which I hate an unreliable narrator. So I'm like the whole time, but I'm glad to have finally gotten to Survive the Night. I read the 8th book in the Wayward Children series. This is Lost in the Moment and Found by Seanan McGuire. The 9th book just came out this year and I'm like, do I read it? I don't know, I'm so nervous. Like I don't know when I want to read it, you know, but like I said, this is the 8th book in the Wayward Children series. I give this one a 5-star. This is quite possibly my absolute favorite, and it is so sad. It is just like such a, it's so sad. Literally wrote oh my on my Goodreads because like my heart, I feel like it's broken. I fear my heart is broken because of this book. So the Wayward Children series overall is about these kiddos who are going through some sort of traumatic event in their life, and they come across a door that always says be sure above it, and most of the time they're sure. They go through the door and then they're in these like magical lands of like unicorns or cats or anything. There's just so many things. There's so many things that could happen. Vampires, like it can be spooky. In every other book, you're either at Eleanor West's home for wayward children, which are kids that have come back from their doors but are anxiously trying to get back into where they came from. And then the other, you're following someone's story who goes through a door. And in this particular book, you're following this girl named Antoinette. She goes by Ancy. I think that's the cutest thing ever. And her backstory is so, this one was like the most triggering and the most like sad to read. I would look up trigger warnings for sure on this one, and she runs away from home because of it. This one was so sad, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. This one was so sad at the beginning. I really hoped it wasn't gonna like keep going with the sad story, and thankfully it stopped at the appropriate time because I would have probably had to put the book down. But she runs away from home and she stumbles across this like shop that says be sure across the top, and she goes in. She's in the shop where lost things go. So she's in this shop with this like bird and this older woman, and basically this is where all the lost things go. People that lose things, that's where it goes. And in this book, I feel like the door they go through and the shop where lost things go is so much more interesting, because doors just randomly show up and they go into them. So she's traveling between doors so much to see other lands, but she always comes back to the shop. And I really liked being able to hear the kind of mechanics and like behind the scenes of the doors, because I was always interested in that, like how a door chooses a child. And it was just so interesting to read that. And Ansie's story was just so sad, and oh my god, the end too also really, really hurt. And I'm so looking forward to the next book. Now I really feel like I should pick it up soon, because I know it follows Ansie again, kind of, but this one was just like so good. Like this one was just, I would say I do recommend reading the entire Wayward Children's series. I just do. Because I feel like you need a little bit of backstory, but also just like this one was just so good. It was just so good. They're all good, but this one was my favorite. 5 stars. This was another 5-star for me. This was incredible. I loved this one. Next, I read my Book of the Month book for the month of April. If you are not signed up for Book of the Month, I'll put my referral link down below. I'm just obsessed with it. I've been obsessed with it for over a year. I love it. I picked The Husbands by Holly Gramazio. First of all, obsessed with this cover. Second of all, I never pick like literary fiction, but this just sounded so fun to me, so I had to pick it for this month. I ended up sadly giving it a 2.75. I rounded it up to a 3. Now that I'm thinking about it in retrospect, my rating might change, but let's talk about the plot first. So in this book, we're following Lauren, who comes home from a night out drinking with her friends and discovers there's a man in her home claiming to be her husband. And she's like, boy, what? She's a single woman. She's like, I don't know what you're talking about. She has no idea who this man is. She goes through her phone and realizes, wait, I am married to this man. She has pictures of their wedding. Her apartment has been changed. And she quickly realizes when he goes upstairs to change a light bulb in the attic, and then comes down a new husband, and the attic is magical and it's new husbands. And see, that premise is so good. And I will say, I was really nervous that it was going to be like we learned about 4 husbands. We got like 400. She in the first 3 chapters is just rotating through husbands. It was so funny and fun and fast-paced. And of course there is some times where she stops for like a week or 2 and we're kind of living her life with a new husband, which I did enjoy. I felt like the pacing of this was a little off, but I was okay with it. And then the end, I don't know. I feel like I didn't know where this book was going. The whole time I'm reading this, I'm like, I have absolutely no idea where this book is going. I'm just here for the husbands and the ride, and I'm just interested to see what happens. And at first when I finished this book, I was upset with the ending because I felt like, that's it, that's the end, what are you talking about? But now that I've had time to sit and think about the end, I kind of like it. I kind of like how it ended because it makes sense, and it also was like sad but not sad. It just made sense, and it's hard to explain if you haven't read the book, and I'm not trying to spoil the book for you, but I liked it. I think now I would probably change my rating to a 3.25. I would just put it up an extra 0.5. So from 2.75 to a 3.5 or 3.25. Confusing. Because I did like the end. I just felt like the pace was weird. But otherwise, it was fine. I do recommend you read it though if you're interested. Because it was a good time. But I don't know. It was fine. And I think I like the end now. And then the last book that I read for this month, my only horror, which is so sad because I just be loving horror, Episode 13 by Craig DeLuey. This has been on my TBR for a while, and I've been like, every time I see it, I'm like, ooh, I want to read that. But like the length of this book, 400 plus pages for a horror, always gives me like, it just weirded me out. 3 stars. I feel like I gave every book 3 stars except for like 1 this month. Okay, so the premise of this is we are following raw footage from a film crew who works on a paranormal investigation show. They're filming their episode 13, which is kind of like their finale, and they're going to the Foundation House, which is known to be the most haunted house in America. And every episode up until then, there's been no hauntings. So this book is raw footage. It is mixed media. So it's like journal entries, text messages, emails, GoPro transcripts. It's very fast paced. So the length of this book is silly because you're flipping the pages pretty quickly. And they go to Foundation House. and it is haunted. It actually is haunted, and you're experiencing them experiencing it. And that premise alone is really cool. It's really cool. And so the first like 100 or so pages, like day 1, day 2, I'm in. I was so here for it. It was spooky, it was creepy. It takes this weird turn. They find this well, they go down the well, and then things just get weird. That's how I'm gonna explain it. It says House of Leaves meets Haunting of Hill House, which I agree. Because what happened there? It just like went so weird. And I just really liked the beginning. I thought the beginning was leading up to something crazy, and then it just kind of took a weird path. The ending though, like the epilogue, there's like 2 epilogues. The epilogue, I liked the end. I thought that was really good. Sometimes I feel like horror endings can be a little weird. That one was really good. I did like the ending, especially because that middle part there, what was happening, I don't know. I liked it. Didn't love it. 3 stars. It was a just fine horror book in my opinion, but if you want to read it, I do recommend you read it, especially if you liked House of Leaves. You'd really like this. Alrighty, so those are the 6 books that I read this month. A lot of 3 stars, and then, you know, that Lost in the Moment and Found, which was just wonderful. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Go ahead and subscribe to my channel if you're not already, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye guys.